had somebody going around picking up rocks, they would find things crawling out from underneath them. The problem is there's almost nobody picking up the rocks. And the people you have here, particularly Jim, who I write about in my book, The Fine Print, are doing really important work that deals with your pocketbook, with your future, and your safety. And we live in a society that, unfortunately, there's a lot of hostility to investigative reporting, an enormous amount of it. If you have not read something called the Powell Memo, after you leave here tonight, I hope you go to the internet and you look up the Powell Memo and you read it. Lewis Powell, later a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, wrote a memo after Ralph Nader burst into the public scene. And Ralph Nader began challenging the assumptions on which corporate America was operating. He and a handful of other people, Morton Mintz at the Washington Post among them, began revealing all sorts of things that people had no idea about. That, for example, you could design cars that people wouldn't die in nearly as often, and it didn't cost any more than the cars they were selling. And what Justice, then lawyer Lewis Powell did is he wrote a memo that said, we've got to stop this. And we have to bring the institutions of America in line with the interests of business. He was a business lawyer. We have to get the media under control. And read this memo. It's very revealing about what's going on. Now, the state of investigative reporting in America today is not a simple picture. And one of the things people who do investigative reporting learn is the world is not black and white. It's in shades of gray, and often very subtle shades of gray. And it's very difficult sometimes to tease out those shades, and yet it's important to do so. The fastest disappearing job in America, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, is journalism. In Philadelphia, in the 1990s, there were over 260 journalists from various organizations who covered various aspects of city government. The schools, the courts, the city council, the mayor, the regulatory agencies, over 260. There are now fewer than 50. In Bell, California, a poor, small, blue-collar suburb of Los Angeles, the city manager was being paid $800,000 a year. Members of the city council were being paid $250,000 a year. They had these enormous salaries that were being paid, and it was all done right in the open. Because for years, no reporter had shown up at a Bell Council meeting. There are cities, large cities the size at least of the one that I live just outside of, Rochester, where weeks go by where there is no journalist in the room during council meetings. Government derives its powers from the consent of the people. Government is a fiction we create to make our society work. But if the only people paying attention to the government are those who make money off of it, it can very quickly be turned into an institution to rob you blind, which is the subtitle of my new book, The Fine Print, that I spent the last 4 years digging out material that, in my opinion, should have been on the front page of major newspapers in this country, and yet nobody but me has reported